Yo, what's up, guys? Today I'm gonna be rating every kaiju that costs G cells and XP. So game passes, event kaiju will be excluded from this list because I don't have most of them, and that would be unfair. So first off, we have Moguera. I heard all my max kaijus. Moguera, I'd give it a 9, simply because it is OP, but its health is kind of fragile, and against faster kaiju, because of its limited moveset, it's at a bit of a disadvantage, and it is targeted a lot. You'll usually end up killing them, but a lot of people will hate you for using this kaiju because of how good it is and for how cheap it is, and also it's pretty annoying to fight. Next, we have Rodan. Rodan is pretty good. I'd give it 6, simply because it's a bit of a glass cannon, and its attacks don't do much, and it leaves a lot of time for healing. It is a pretty good kaiju, but not that good. Basically, I only maxed it because I saw the Mechagodzilla 2 teaser, and got pretty excited. Not the Showa Mechagodzilla 2, just the Mechagodzilla 2 from the Heisei era. Next is Godzilla 2019. I give this one a 7. There are things better than it, and it is pretty overrated in the power. I actually do think G21 is a better kaiju than G19, contrary to popular opinion. It is pretty, it does have a very good model, and I recommend using it if you have that amount of money. Next is Millennium. I'd also give this one a 9, because it has a spammable beam that does 3,000 damage, and I'm pretty sure that says enough, although it does take a while to charge up. Next is Showa Mechagodzilla 2. I would give this one a 5.9. I would give it a 10, but that's before the nerf. Now it's just not as good. It does have a very overpowered beam combo, but other than that, it's just glass. Next up, we have Type 2 Curio. Now, I'd give this one like an 8.5, because now I'd give this one a 10, because it does do a lot of damage. No, 9.5, because of its like lower health. It does a lot of damage, but its health is a bit mediocre. Just spam the missiles and use like the beam, same with Moguera, but on land. So it's basically like a land version of Moguera. Next, here's Heisei Gojira. Now this one is like an 8. I'd give this one an 8. Its beam is overpowered, and it does a lot of damage if you're good with it. And the stationary mode buffs the attacks even more, which can prove overpowered. Honestly, the strongest thing it can beat is probably like an MG21. Next is Ultima. Now, Ultima is an 8 because of it has very massive reach, high damage, high health. But it is a very huge target, and it's slow. So if you're fighting a fast beam spammer like Batra, Rodan, Moguera, Curio, you're gonna suffer a lot, and it's gonna you're gonna take a lot of hits and not be able to catch up to them. which is very frustrating. Same with Frostbite, in my opinion. Next is Gojira. This is the first, of the first. But the problem with being first is that it all goes downhill. 10 out of 10. 1 million out of 10. JK. Honestly, because of its high DPS, I'd actually give it a 7. And because it's really underestimated as a starter. So, yeah. Next is Kamada. Kamada, I'd honestly give a 5. Because it has really good DPS. And it's a water buffed kaiju too. But it's a pain to level up. And its health is absolutely atrocious for a land kaiju, in my opinion. Next is Shinigawa. Now I rate this one a 6.5 because it can beam spam and it can counter pretty much any beam. Like, even if you're fighting like a Destoroyah, which you probably won't, you'll probably die because it's fast and can use its melee attacks to do a lot of damage. To be honest, it's a decent kaiju, and it's very underestimated. Like, if you're fighting a MG21 and use the beam, they can just keep spamming away the beam that's longer. Still take a bit of damage, though. But you do have to pay the price for 2,620 base health, which is really bad. Next is Angus, which, in my opinion, is probably the worst starter. So any Angus fans would have to wait for Singular Point Angus to get added. Singular Point... Now, Angus, it doesn't have much going for it. I'd give it a 3, honestly. It just dies too quickly. Honestly, it can outsmart egotistical little kids on their mom's iPad and pretty much fold them, but that's about it. Now, Gazora, I give it higher than Angus. I give it a 5. Simply because it's a 0 on land and a 10 on water. And in between that is 5. Basically, its damage on land is tiny, but underwater, you can just clap anything. I recommend it if you're I highly recommend this if you're an extremely patient person who is a Jedi Master, because only a Jedi Master would have the amount of patience to use Gazora. Next is Kamonga. Basically just a beam spam runner like Shinigawa. I guess it's not really that good. I've never really used Kamonga that much. I'd give it a solid 6 because it is pretty good, and it did defeat Manila. So, well, until Showa saved him. Next is Male Muto. Male Muto is basically like the opposite of Moguera. It's weak against land kaiju, but strong against other flyers, in my opinion, that is. So basically the opposite to Moguera. It is a pain to level up, but I would give it... I'd say it's just as good as Fumuto. Well, Fumuto's a bit better. But, yeah. Fumuto's pretty good. No, and Hawk Muto is pretty good too. I'd give this a 6.5. Next, that's Roblox. Next is Mothra Larva. Don't use Mothra. It's actually a really cringy kaiju. It's pretty bad. You'll basically get wrecked by Manilas and Kamadas. Alright, just if you want to die, use this kaiju. If you want to kill players, don't use this kaiju. Next we have Kamibus. Kamibus is a water-buffed kaiju like Kamada, and it has this pretty OP shield attack. Its health is pretty good. Its speed is not good at all because it's a turtle. Its regen is pretty decent, and its damage is alright too. I'd give Kamibus another 6.5. Mothra Larvae is a 0. Well, a 1, because you could kinda use it, but like kinda just a troll, like, ooh, look at me, I'm gonna die. Here's Mothra. Mothra is kind of a decent kaiju. It's not that good, honestly. There are better kaijus than Mothra. Like, it's best. Can you stop? It's basically the OP thing about it is that I can just fly by and use the wind attack. But after that's been nerfed, I'd give it a 5.3. Next is Megalon. Here's the last starter on the list. Megalon is pretty good. I mean, I'd say it's the second best starter. The best starter before 1954 got remodeled. Technically remodeled because they changed the size of its different body parts, like the torso. It can burrow underground, but don't even use that at close range, because, like, they can attack you. Honestly, I'd give this a 6. Now, Batra is better than Mothra for different reasons. Batra is better than Mothra because, 1, its beam is more spammable, 2, it does more damage, 3, even though it has worse reach, it is still better at different things. Like, you could, like, spam these attacks, like, at high damage, but its health is pretty bad. But it's not that bad for a flyer. Next we have Titanus Masura from the 2019 sequel to the 2014 Godzilla reboot movie about the King of the Monsters. Basically, it's just a giant moth, and it just blinds you. It's only really OP if you just blind the player. Just build up your V ability, fly up to someone, go, and blind them. If they can't see, attack them, like attack the back of their head, and then fly away. And eventually they'll just get low killed, and you'll get an assist kill, and I don't know. Next is Gigan. Gigan is pretty good. It has that bomb claw. It kind of just slides. Its beam has been nerfed. It's done a lot more before. I'd say it's still a pretty good kaiju. Honestly, it's a strong kaiju, and I recommend using it. Its health is pretty good for a flyer. Kind of just slides, but it's still good. Megalon's a 6.5. Batra's a 7. Solid 7. Masura is a 5.8. And Gigan is a 7.5. Kamakurasan is not that good. This is the Final Wars Kamakurasan. It's not a Showa Kaiju, by the way. It's Millennium, technically, because it's the Final Wars one, but no one cares about that. Looks more like a grasshopper, to be honest. Its health is really bad. It's a glass cannon. And it doesn't hit very hard either. It's merely a troll kaiju. If you like to troll, maybe main Kamakurasan. Next is Biollante. Biollante has a problem with being targeted, even though it is underrated a lot, because it does a fair amount of damage, and its beam is spammable even though it does 1,250 damage at max, and its base health is 5,190. That's not bad at all. Its speed and regen, however, could use a buff, but then they'd also have to make the price larger for balancing reasons. Next is Cilla. Now, Cilla's really good for larger land kaiju, but if it's fighting something short, like Junior or Manila, or like Kong, or Mothra larva, it's going to suffer a lot. Because its hitbox is in a way that's, like, not good. It was a decently balanced kaiju before, and it was nerfed, but everyone got so annoyed at it just, like, running up to G21s and melee spamming, because that's all it could do to be a good kaiju. And some people like to melee spam, so they used it. Kamakurasan, 4.9. Biollante is a 9. And Cilla is a 7.9. Now, Manda is another of those water kaiju. It's not that good. It has a decent beam spam. I mean, it's better than Mothra, that's for sure. You just beam spam in the water, which is gonna make a lot of people mad. But all they can really do is complain in the chat and then leave the game. In my opinion, Manda is pretty much just Shinigawa, but in the water. And long. And people and you're just a giant snake. Eight. This is not an 8, that's too high. I give this a 6. Very solid 6. Godzilla Junior. I mean, people say Junior's OP. I disagree, because basically the only thing good about Junior is for grinding dust and roleplay. Because there's nothing really else that Junior can do that's good. Other than that, Junior's a perfect kaiju. 2.5. Female Muto is a very good tanking kaiju. It was the main antagonist in the 2014 reboot movie. And it's very good, actually. It does a bit of damage. Its health is decent, too. Just run in and tank your opponent, and you'll probably kill them. It's that good. I'd give this an 8, honestly. An 8. Most kaijus on this list are probably 8. Next is Megaguirus. This is simply a This is basically a Manda or Shinigawa, but in the air. And it doesn't have a beam. It has a concentrated energy fireball that does the amount of damage as a beam. So you just fly by and use it, and it's spammable. Its health, however, is terrible. It's probably the second or third lowest health in the game. The lowest health would be Mother Longlegs, but I am not going to review that one, simply because it is a ROBLOX kaiju. Megaguirus excels in everything in Kaiju Universe, but it does pay that price for a very small amount of health. It's not that good, even for a flyer. I'd give it a 7, a 6.8, a 7, or whatever. Here's Jet Jaguar. Now, Jet Jaguar with max speed is an absolute nightmare. Max damage, it's really good. It's a fairly overpowered kaiju. Basically, just run over to your opponent, use the beam, hide behind something, use the beam again, and they just can't catch you unless they're a flyer. But it's pretty easy to outsmart flyers. Especially with the drop kick that takes you underground and makes you invincible while you're underground. To be honest, Jet Jaguar gets an 8.5. It's a underrated kaiju. Showa Gojira is next. Well, Showa Gojira is pretty good. Basically, it's just basically a junior that can fly, but it's actually good. And it has pretty decent DPS, but it's mostly a flyer, because you go on the buildings, you use the beam, and then you'll like weaken them with like some melee, and then you'll do the beam again, and you'll kill them. Which would be pretty annoying for like Ultima or something. To be honest, Showa gets a 7. Well, no, I'll give it a 6.7 simply because it isn't that good against other flyers mostly. Yeah, 7 because it actually is. Next is Titanosaurus, which has had its nerfs, but all you have to really do is run, jump, and spam the Gale Strike attack, and that does its fair amount of damage until you can use the beam, which does a pretty decent amount of damage for a kaiju like Titanosaurus. There's not much to say about it. Its health is not good at all. Its speed is decent. Its regen is pretty decent as well. I'd give it a 7 as well. It's not that good. It's pretty good, though. Next is Heisei Ghidorah. Heisei Ghidorah it's good, actually, because it has good health for a very good health for a flyer. The regen is already decent, and the damage is very high for what it is. The beam especially, that's barely spammable. What I don't like about this kaiju is that its hurt box, if you try to like use the melee, the hurt box, is pretty bad, and you can sometimes can't hit the opponent unless they're like a larger kaiju like Biollante. Honestly, for that I'd just give it an 8. I miss MKG. Remodel that in MKG, please. Next is Kamakurasan, Shin Form 4 from Godzilla 2016. Honestly, yeah, it's 5,000 something health. That's good. The regen is not that good. Speed is terrible. The damage could be better. I'd give it a 5.5. Because it has been better. Honestly, it's not that good. It's kind of an XP bag. It's a cheap Ultima. Jet Jaguar. Speaking of Ultima, here's Jet Jaguar Beta. They nerfed its range but buffed its health, so I'd keep it the same, honestly. This gets a 7. Can you be quiet, doggy? Yeah, okay. Next is Behemoth. Behemoth is very overpowered against land kaiju, but it is pretty good against flyers too, but very stressful. Because flyers like Titanus, people use Titanus Rodin, like to just bully Behemoth mains. I know there are probably some Behemoth mains watching, but well, not to this point. People probably would have clicked off. But if you skipped ahead and saw this, Behemoth gets a 6 simply because it's OP. It's just bullied all the time by sky camping. Speaking of sky camping, we have Showa King Ghidorah. Showa KG is good. I mean, I like it. It's not the best, but like if you want a flyer and you have like 30 kg cells, get this. It's a worse Heisei King Ghidorah, but it's a lot more fun to play. That's my opinion. It could be better. 6.5. Next is Godzilla 2014. Godzilla 2014 is a decent kaiju. Its beam, even though nerfed, is still rather overpowered. Even though, in my opinion, shouldn't be. Its health is also really good. Well, not that good. I mean, it's not that high a tier of a kaiju. Regen is alright. Speed is a bit lower than decent. I'd give this an 8. Next is Ready Player One Mechagodzilla. I'd also give this an 8. Simply because its health isn't that good, but it can like run and spam missiles. Not at high range, but still very overpowered if close enough. I'd actually give this like an 8, definitely. If you know what you're doing is good. If you're just some noob trying to like tank with it because it looks strong, you're gonna die very quickly. Next is Titanus Rodin. Now this thing is really good, but really also pretty stressful to fight because its hurt box is pretty broken. His health is decent for a flyer, and it has very high speed because it's Rodan. I'd give it a 6, in my opinion. A 6.2. Next is Final Wars. Final Wars gets a 9. Final Wars is an absolute beast. Just join in, pick Final Wars, click Goji Scales, join in, hit someone with your Spiral Breath, then hit someone with your Atomic Breath, and they're already almost dead. You can just spam the melee, because there's some melee attacks, like there's 3 of them, because one was added in the Final Wars rework. Next is Titanus Kong. Titanus Kong gets a 7. Titanus Kong gets a 6.5. Would get a 9 if it wasn't so reliant on glitches, like jumping down and like pounding with the axe. This is like a very weird broken hitbox, so like you can hit people very easily. Which is very OP for ranging. So actually I'd give it a 7. It's a very decent kaiju, and I recommend it. Now we're moving on to the end game kaijus. Next we have Monster Zero. Monster Zero is pretty overpowered against kaijus like G21 or Final Wars that I just mentioned. But it does take a long time to level up. Like, if you're that kind of person that gets bitches and touches grass, this kaiju is not for you. However, if you have a lot of time on your hands, and you don't have a job and live with your mom, then I definitely get Monster Zero. It's very OP at high levels. Next we have Mechagodzilla 2021, which is, in my opinion, the best land kaiju. Now, I say this for several reasons. Reason number one is that its beam does about the same as like a hollow quarry from Godzilla 2021, which is very sickly trash. Don't even use it unless you're using it for like the building missions. Its melee attacks do a lot of damage. Its regen is really good. Its health is also really good. Its speed is very decent for a land kaiju. I'd give this a 10. Next is Godzilla 2021. Godzilla 2021 is almost as good as MG21. I'd say it's the third best Godzilla, sitting behind Heisei and Ultima. But, like, it's good. Its beam is fairly spammable. It was nerfed before. People say this is absolute Play-Doh, but I disagree. Basically, pretty much they say that because they see a lot of G21s, but they're actually just little kids on their mom's iPad with a king complex, but they don't know how to use it properly. If you use this properly, it is an absolute tank. Nothing can beat you. Well, this can beat you. Destoroyah. Destoroyah is good. A lot of people say it's the best flyer because it has extremely good health for a flyer. Like, really good health for a flyer. Its regen could be a lot better. It has been nerfed before. I mean, it requires you to level up Junior. So, it should be like... And it is like the second most expensive kaiju. So why not? I'd give this a 9.8. Because it is good. But it's like... It's targeted constantly. And takes a while to level up because of that. I do think it's an overrated kaiju. Personally, I main Moguera. But there are no more G-Cells and XP kaiju left. So, peace out, guys. I'll leave timestamps.